Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Led by current owner Sean Hendricks, Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you are in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. We all love the big-budget superhero films, but the world of independent cinema remains a place of unbridled creative freedom and entrepreneurial spirit. Whether you're an independent filmmaker yourself, or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals. Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and much more. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to count down our top 10 Krypto moments across time and media is Wearing the Cape cosplayer and returning guest, Daniel Sanchez. Welcome back.
And actual Krypto owner.
That's right. One of the things I want to ask you about. On that note, actually, let's just jump right into it. I've been kicking around this episode for a while, but given that we are on the precipice of the release of James Gunn's Superman, set to feature Krypto, the super dog from Krypton, very prominently based on everything we can tell, this felt like the time to do it. And let me start by asking you, my friend, I have a sense of the answer based on prior conversations, but for the benefit of our audience here, what sort of place has Krypto occupied for you in your larger Superman fan journey?
I loved Krypto in the comics, since the Superboy comics that I collected when I was a kid. And it was sort of perfectly lined up with my life because I had a small, shaggy little, it was a peekapoo, so Pekingese and poodle. That was a rescue, sort of. So probably closer to the James Gunn version than the classic Silver Age or Alex Ross version. My current Krypto looks exactly like the Alex Ross version. But as a boy, reading stories about Superboy, who had a super dog, you couldn't not love that. And so it just became part of my definition of who Superboy was. And then later, the extended Superman family, to me, always included Krypto. So it was just the way the world was and should be.
I can understand that. I can definitely understand that. Now, I suspect people are generally aware of Krypto's backstory, but just by way of context here, the Superdog debuted in Adventure Comics number 210 in 1955. The story being that Krypto was the test subject in this prototype rocket launched by Jor-El that got knocked off course and eventually landed on Earth after Clark had already become Superboy. And I would say that's largely been the backstory, with the exception of the post-crisis period where we had a couple of other different iterations of Krypto floating around, which play into my Krypto fan journey to whatever extent that exists. But that's sort of the overall idea. And the character has been part of the comics, certainly, for the most part, since his debut in various forms. Relatively few instances, I would argue, in terms of other media adaptations, though there are certainly a number of really key critical ones. The Filmation Superboy shorts in particular, I know that was huge and informative for you, and they've recently become a favorite of mine. And most recently, just a few years ago, we had the League of Super Pets movie. We have Krypto set to appear in the new movie. And this was really kind of a blind spot for me, but Krypto did have his own 39-episode series that aired on Cartoon Network, Krypto the Super Dog from 2005 to 2006. And there have been other instances along the way as well, including the Titans television show where we got a live action Krypto. So Krypto has popped up, but again, I would argue probably adapted less than you might expect. Fair to say?
Less than you would think for something that just seems to be woven into the fabric of the Superman legend. But I think that just goes to show the heart that he has, that even when he's not there, you still feel him there.
Yeah, fair. Now, all that being said, Krypto, for me, has typically not occupied a particularly significant spot in my Superman fandom. And this is something we could and probably should have made a drinking game out of over the years. But just like Supergirl and Kandor and Zod and the Phantom Zone, Krypto falls into the same category for me of pre-crisis elements that I either did not meet or that I met in a different form during the post-crisis triangle era that I grew up in. So for the first about decade worth of my Superman fandom, with the exception of finally reading Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow when it was collected in the late 90s, with the exception of that, the only Krypto I had was the Earth canine that Bibbo Babowski rescued from drowning in Adventures of Superman 501 during Reign of the Superman.
Really?
Yeah.
For viewers who can't see, my jaw is open. Wow, what an entry point.
Yeah, and it was definitely a standout moment for anyone who needs a real quick refresher. There was this older woman who could not afford to feed her new litter of puppies and put them in this sack and threw them in the river to drown them because she couldn't afford to pay for food for them. And Bibbo jumped into the water and he pulled them out, and it's a real bleak moment where it seems like all of them have already perished. But then it turns out that one is still alive, and that's the puppy that Bibbo adopts. Originally plans to call him Krypton in honor of Superman's home planet, but the place that makes the collars, there's only space for 6 letters, right? So we end up with Krypto instead of Krypton. And the dog lives with Krypto for a while, and then during the Battle for Metropolis, Fall of Metropolis storyline, he goes off to live with Superboy in Hawaii and is part of that crew for a while. And then we'll actually go along with Superboy when the setting shifts to Cadmus. And then that Krypto disappears. But so that's my first Krypto, just a non-powered earthly canine who looks similar to the traditional Krypto and has the name, but that's it. And is not particularly tied to Superman himself, but rather to Bibbo and then to the character we'll come to learn as Kon-El. But then in 2001, in my beloved Loeb Kelly era of the Superman titles, we would get that Return to Krypton storyline, where Superman and Lois visit a very Silver Age-esque version of Krypton in the Phantom Zone. And there, they'll meet Krypto, who will follow them back to Earth. So at that point, we get a powered super dog from a version of Krypton. And so that's the, I guess, the strongest kind of taste of the character that I got in as close to a true version as possible for a good few years. And then once we enter the post-Infinite Crisis period, then with Jeff Johns' Secret Origin and whatnot, we revert back to the traditional backstory for Krypto. So all that to say that I sort of backed into the character of Krypto in a little bit of a different way. And that's probably why he never really occupied that huge a place in my fandom. And the other thing too is I've never disliked animals or dogs, but I didn't grow up with pets. So the whole notion of a man and his dog, I kind of got it in a more academic sense, but it wasn't something that really spoke to me personally. But that shifted a bit in recent years. We've spent a lot of time with and dog sitting my mother-in-law's dog and my sister-in-law's dog. And so my perspective on that has shifted a lot as well. So my appreciation for Krypto has really grown a lot since I started.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that Krypto, the character, does. I think it's great that your entry point was his relationship with Connor. I don't know if that was the first time that those two interacted, but it surely started a long history of Krypto and Connor being together and, in a sense, looking out for each other. And the more you learn about Krypto, you realize that's often his story, is he'll be there for someone when they really need it. Um, as I was gathering, my favorites and thoughts and such for this episode, I realized that what was emerging was basically the types of hero stories that Krypto would be a part of. In literature, they break stories down where there's man versus man, there's man versus nature, and there's man versus himself. And most stories fall within those categories. With Krypto, there are categories. So there are times where Krypto will be there for a physical save. He'll join a battle. He'll be your comrade in arms. But there are also times where he is an emotional save. He's there when you're lonely. He's there when you're hurt. There are times where he provides protection. So if Superman needs to be somewhere else, but he needs to know Ma and Pa are safe, he will leave Krypto at the Kent farm. And he knows that he has a literal super watchdog and they will be safe, super protector. And there are times, which we'll get to because they're on my list, where Krypto is the impetus for the entire story. In other words, if it were not for Krypto, this series of events would not have happened. So his force, I guess, as a necessary protagonist in a lot of these larger stories is something that I hope people can take a chance and maybe read some of these or watch some of these episodes and appreciate.
Well said. And I really concur with your delineation of those categories. And what I found and was struck by as I was prepping for this episode and I was going through stories that I was already familiar with and then also getting familiar with stories that were new to me. For myself, I found the ones that resonated the most, and I think this became a bit of a theme for my list, but it was those emotional support type stories. And I guess for me, when we're dealing with Krypto stories, especially older ones that are played more for laughs or just a sort of a fun romp or whatnot, they're fine. But the ones that really grab me are when he is there to undercut a character's loneliness, to provide that emotional support in a time of need. And there are a lot of instances where, yes, it is Kal-El, but we've also seen him paired with, as I already said, Kon-El, Kara or Kara, depending on your pronunciation, other members of the Superman family. I don't want to spoil my list, but those are the moments when Krypto is there to provide that emotional support in a moment of loneliness, in an hour of need. That's what stands out the most. And then when I think about the types of stories that I feel work best with Krypto or the function that Krypto can serve, there's nothing wrong with having Krypto be part of the Superman family and fly around with Superman as an adult when the super family is fully formed. All like, that's fine. And that's basically the realm we're in now, where Krypto's part of the mix in the comics and everything. And it seems like that's what we're getting in the movie and everything. But I guess for me, I really like the angle of Krypto being there at an early part in the story, in the Superboy chapter of the mythology, when Clark is still figuring out where he came from and where he's going, where he doesn't yet have Supergirl and Kandor and access to aspects of his Kryptonian heritage. And Krypto can function as that and serve as that representation and show him, no, there's someone else out there like him. By the same token, though it didn't make my list, I did like in the, spoiler alert, series finale of Superman and Lois, where in Clark's final chapter of life, a version of Krypto, albeit a human or earthly canine, not a powered Kryptonian dog, but the dog enters the picture and provides some much needed companionship at an otherwise lonely time in this final season. So I think that's the lane I like best for the character, and I think you'll see a lot of that represented on my list.
I could not agree more. If you were to ask a child to draw Krypto, I think they would draw Krypto with a big smile, doing something so loving and helpful, probably very near another character, in the way that old Yeller would have been drawn. And I remember being a boy marveling at that kind of relationship. And one day it occurred to me, I wonder if that's one of the superpowers, because Krypto is, I would think, the same as Superman. It's everything but better. So as much as an animal can sense your feelings and can tell when you're sick and they just want to be near you and they want to take care of you, or they can tell if someone is threatening you and they step up, how much more so then might Krypto's super senses be attuned to those things? So it's not basically the heart of a regular dog surrounded by the Kryptonian outer skin and powers of a super dog, but I think his emotional senses are also greater. And once I thought about that, I just fell in love with the character all over again.
I love that. I love that. All right. I guess without further ado, let's get into our list here. We each made a list of our top 10 favorite stories or moments, right? We conferred off mic a long time ago and we said, let's not try to make it a crypto-centric story exclusively, because that might be more limiting, but rather we opened it up to moments within stories, whether or not they were crypto-centric. So our top 10, as we always do when we have these lists, we'll trade off. I'll have you go first as our guest here and we'll take turns. And if something is on both of our lists, whenever it comes up first, that's when we'll both talk about it. And then I also put the call out to our Patreon community, as I always do. And I got some great submissions. There was far and away a winner, and people can probably guess what that was, but it's the one that garnered the most submissions. But there were also a few more kind of off the beaten path picks that were really cool, and I'll sprinkle those in as well. So Daniel, would you like to kick us off here? What's your number 10 crypto moment?
Number 10, directly on target with what we've been saying of the emotional saves, is the chapter in Dark Knight's Death Metal, where, if you're not familiar with the story, Superboy Prime is a villain and has very little to hold on to, very little in his realm of existence to look at the universe and find anything good to believe in. And there's an absolutely amazing scene where it's Krypto that shows him compassion and unwavering love, and it plays a key role in redeeming Superboy Prime.
My friend, that is number 5 on my list. Great pick. So yeah, Dark Knight's Death Metal, The Secret Origin from 2020 by Jeff Johns, Scott Snyder, Francis Manapul, Jerry Ordway. I'm not going to recap all of Death Metal because been there, done that, still recovering. But I think you summed it up beautifully and I will say, thankfully, this is one issue that I think you actually can lift out of Death Metal and hand to someone. And I think it works really nicely as a Superboy Prime / Krypto story. But yes, Krypto as the catalyst for this character's redemption. Incredible. Now, whether or not Superboy Prime is deserving of that redemption, debatable, but I loved it. And we essentially see 3, although arguably 4 when you get to the very end, but I would say a trio of key interactions between them, right? So Superboy Prime is pulled into this battle against the Batman Who Laughs, who's created these 52 other worlds as a whole thing. But he's really there on his own. And then Krypto comes up to him and he has a line. He says, "I remember the first story I read about you." Right? Because Superboy Prime is from this world, this Earth, where he's read about all these characters the same way we do. Essentially, he's from the quote unquote real world. And then Connor intervenes, like, "Get away. What are you doing with my dog?" But then there's a critical juncture during the battle where I would say it's sort of the last temptation of Superboy Prime, where he toys with this idea of trying to usurp this power for himself to create the Earth he always wanted for himself. And in his narration, he's like, they, referring to the other heroes who have assembled, he's like, "They all hate me, so I hate back." And do you feel this character's pain, right? Misunderstood. It obviously went down a very dark path, but started out with good intentions. And then as he's saying, "They all hate me, I hate them back," Krypto comes to his side, comes to his aid. And he has this moment and he stops and he ends up giving up what he wanted the most. And instead of trying to take this power for himself, he uses it to end the battle, at least that particular iteration of it, and is killed in the process. And then we get what I would say is that third powerful moment of Krypto with the fallen body of Superboy Prime. And it's this beautiful double page spread. It's gorgeous. And then we find out that that's not the end of the road for Superboy Prime after all. And we get, I would say, a fourth interaction with a version of Krypto. But I'll leave people to go read that if they want to see that piece of it. But Krypto as the catalyst for redemption, it was beautiful. And that was actually one that one of our audience members singled out as well. Duncan said, it's a really powerful resolution to Prime's story, and I hope they never undo it.
Hear, hear.
Yep. So great. All right. So our first one was an overlap. So, all right. So that was your number 10. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that one?
No, I want to hear yours.
All right. So my number 10 is the opening scene of the League of Super Pets movie from 2022. So this was, of course, produced by and starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. This was during DJ's big Warner Brothers land grab of that period of time. It didn't work out so great for him in the end, but this, of course, is when the hierarchy of power was going to change. I watched this movie when it came out on streaming, and I thought it was a lot of fun. I watched it probably more so because I thought my son would be into it, and he ended up watching a lot of it with me, which was cool. And I'm a fan overall, but especially that opening scene. I take it I was going to say, I'm sure you saw it. I know you saw it. I know you were there at the theater with your Krypto in full costume. Yeah.
Yes.
Is this one on your list at all anywhere?
Oh, it is number 4.
Number 4. Is it specifically this opening or the whole movie or a different scene?
It is because of the Reeve Donner era callbacks in the opening, but also throughout, because Krypto shows failings of being envious, borderline jealous, of not wanting to work with others, of feeling superior until he isn't. And it shows a journey that a child could understand of, okay, feelings happen, feelings are real, and sometimes feelings are very, very big. But look at Krypto. He worked through it, and he trusted friends, and you get to see where that gets you if you are willing maybe to be like Krypto. So the opening, absolutely. I had a little tear watching the whole thing. It was everything that you could ever want, but the rest of the movie as well.
Well said. No, that's great. I think so. Between our two entries, we've I think captured that movie, and I agree with everything you said. But yeah, I zeroed in on that opening scene where Krypto joins Kal-El in the rocket departing Krypton, and it's the sort of thing. Do I need that in every iteration? No, and in fact, I specifically don't want that in other iterations because to me, I think it's generally important that the baby, and only the baby, is placed in that rocket and goes. But for a different spin on it, and for a League of Super Pets movie that is based around Krypto and then these other superpowered animals, it was so beautiful to see Krypto join him in that rocket, to see him freeing himself from Jor-El's arms and make it in just as the little dome was closing, and to be able to accompany Kal-El on that ride and provide that comfort and that support as Kal-El he's crying, Krypto's licking his face, and they're there for each other. I don't want to spoil the list, but I don't think this will be much of a spoiler. There's another entry coming up that provides, I think, a more sophisticated, nuanced, adult version of Krypto being there all along. This went the more literal route, but I'm cool with it. And I thought it was a really emotional scene. And yeah, so that one's on my list. And that was also one singled out by one of our audience members, Brian, who says, that's such a great way to bring Krypto into the story. I think it's a better origin than testing your rocket on the family dog. Where is the PETA Guild on Krypton? Does that ever bother you? The bit about testing with Krypto?
So there have been variations of that theme.
Right.
And some of them, depending on how Jor-El is depicted, have him very only analytic, very distant. It's a test subject. And one of the ones that I like is when he never meant for his son to form any kind of bond with this test subject because it was only ever meant to be a test subject.
Right.
But now he must contend with the fact that that bond has occurred, and yet he still needs to do what he needs to do. So that to me solves the problem.
Yeah, fair. And yes, we have gotten slight variations. I guess overall, whether it's the family pet that they decide to use in this test, or it's the test subject they bring home that Kal-El gets attached to, either way, given the circumstances of Krypton's impending doom, the fact that no one believes Jor-El and he has to do all of this under intense pressure and time constraints and in secret, right? I think like that helps account for why it ends up being Krypto who's placed in this prototype rocket. So I am okay. Like that typically doesn't bump me, just given the circumstances.
Yeah. And let me add, like, recently, as in within the last 2 weeks, there has been a new comic put out called Krypto, The Last Dog of Krypton, that covers the origin again in a pretty heartfelt way that is very narratively interesting because you hear a lot of those expected conversations between Jor-El and Lara. They're trying to figure out what to do about the Science Council, who's not listening to them. They're still debating how much time they have with the unstable core. But those voices are in the background. What's drawn in the foreground are Krypto and Kal interacting, cuddling up on the couch together. Jor-El stopping to feed Krypto when Lara has to take care of Kal. And the reason that I mention that is because when it does come time to test the rocket, one of the reasons that they use Krypto is because they know he's been trained to be calm. They know that he trusts them. And if they put him in this metal thing, granted, it has a beautifully drawn big red cushion to make him comfortable, but he trusts that he's still safe, even though Jor-El has put him in this thing. And they leave a little video transmission feed inside the rocket so they can continue to talk to Krypto and he can still see them. So it's a very loving situation of, yes, we need to run this test, but they are as good of dog parents while doing it as you can imagine. And the failure in the mission had absolutely nothing to do with Jor-El. A random wormhole opened.
Well, wait, put a pin in that because it might be on one of our lists very shortly. But
okay.
but beautiful setup, and I agree with all of that. Yeah, that's The Last Dog of Krypton by Ryan North and Mike Norton. This new miniseries, the first issue of which, as of this recording, just came out. I highly recommend it, and I have more to say about it very shortly.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good, and that's totally fine. Okay, so. That was my number 10. So you're number 9.
There is a issue of Rebirth where there's a huge battle with the Eradicator and John, young John, still pajama super suit wearing John with no cape, has gotten in way over his head. And the Eradicator has decided that being half human is enough of a reason to be obliterated. And Eradicator shoots a huge old Eradicator blast at John, who is up against a big rock wall, can't go anywhere, can't move. And who zooms in and throws himself in front of the blast? Krypto. The blast saves John. Krypto jumping in front of the blast saves John. And you see Krypto's cape just flutter and fall, and John looks down at the cape. Not only is the scene so impactful to me because of the save, but the fact is that John then picks up that cape and puts it on. And if you never knew where John's first cape came from, it's Krypto's. And I love that scene for that reason.
Oh, that's beautiful. I don't have any Rebirth representation on my list, and I wasn't thinking of that moment, but thank you for reminding me of it. That's a great pick. Okay, my number 9 is from All Star Superman number 6, 2007, of course, by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. And this is young Superman. I would argue this was always meant to be Superboy. It was a young Superman and Krypto playing fetch in space and then sitting down on the moon to gaze upon the earth, which clearly influenced James Gunn. We see that imagery in the forthcoming movie. But I guess the reason why I singled it out on my list here is for that imagery. I think it's really evocative, but I think what Morrison and Quitely do so well throughout that story is show how the scale of Superman's life is so much grander than what we might experience, but the actual activities he's engaging in, they're relatable, right? So he's raising that pet sun eater in the Fortress of Solitude and feeding him, like taking care of a pet, but it's just on this grander scale. Similarly, he has a dog and he plays with his dog and they play fetch, but they play fetch in outer space.
I love that. And I never get tired of seeing Superman play with Krypto, no matter how old Superman becomes, because it's just like you never get tired of seeing him sit at the table at the Kent farm. There's just that callback to he's still that boy. He's still that good Smallville, properly raised, taught right. And like you expect to see him with Krypto looking at the sunset over the farm and like that shy of a life with Lois, that is his perfect moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, you're number 8.
This one is a quick little moment, but when I was reading the story and then this suddenly happened, I thought, oh, how perfect. It's from the Jeff Johns Secret Origin, where young Clark has discovered his powers. He knows he's an alien. He's feeling very lonely. He's feeling very other. And Ma is very worried about him, and Pa is just a little bit more country wisdom about it. He's, just let the boy have his space, Ma. He'll find his peace, kind of a thing. But they can tell Clark is struggling. And there's a moment where there's a sound and Clark hears it and he goes, "What is that?" So he goes to investigate and there's this crash in the cornfields. And you do not see it. You see part of a rocket and you see Clark's reflection as he looks in the glass and he goes, "What is that?" And then he says, "Oh, I think it's opening." And it is not drawn, but all you see is the little word "ARF." And for fans like us, we just get goosebumps and we think, oh my God, this is that Krypto arrived. And boy, did he come at a good time. And you just see the joy in Clark and he's going to be okay. So, Secret Origin.
That is one of my honorable mentions. So it didn't make it onto the top 10, but I did include that as an honorable mention. It's funny because part of me admires the restraint that the story shows in not giving you Krypto all the way, but we know the intent of that scene and you see/hear that ARF and Krypto has arrived. Yeah, that's a great moment. And then it goes exactly back to what I was saying at the top, like catching Clark at that lonely moment, because he's had this interaction with the Legion of Superheroes, like he's been around others, but now he's back in Smallville and lamenting the fact that there's no one else there who can fly, who can do what he can do. And yes, he has Ma and Pa, but there's always going to be that little bit of separation there in terms of what they can understand, in terms of what he's going through. And then, yeah, to have that button on that chapter of the story was really fantastic. And yeah, I'm sure for fans like yourself who grew up with the pre-crisis version of Krypto, to now not just have a Krypto, but to have a Krypto who is from Krypton and arrives in the rocket during this chapter in the character's journey must have been very special.
Oh, absolutely. And, not to go down a Brightburn comparison path, but you could imagine had Krypto not arrived, had Clark continued to have felt so alien, it would have likely been harder and harder for Ma and Pa to keep convincing him that your life is still good and this world is still a home to you. I think it would have possibly felt less like a home. But with Krypto's arrival, he was not only no longer alone, it was someone from where he was from. And so his idea that, okay, there is good, there is, a reason for me to believe, Mom and Pa, that if you don't give up, things can go your way by virtue of you didn't give up. There's maybe that wasn't even intended by Jeff Johns, but I did see that as Clark was saved almost at the cliff. And the Superman that we got later, arguably, could be traced back to the fact that Krypto came when he did.
Interesting. So I don't know that I could ascribe that much in my head canon, that much importance to Krypto, but it's very intriguing. I really do like that notion. Yeah. All right. So my number 8, I was alluding to this before, is, and I shocked myself by including this on the list because it's brand new. It just came out, but I couldn't deny it. It was undeniable to me. And so it's The Last Dog of Krypton, number 1, which just came out, by Ryan North and Mike Norton. And you gave us the setup for it beautifully. And the moment, though, that just grabbed me and warranted a spot on this list is when Krypto is in that test rocket and the rocket is approaching the wormhole. And Jor-El and Lara are talking to Krypto through that video conferencing screen. And they realize what's happening. And they say to each other, speak normally. Don't let him know something's up. Speak normally. Keep him calm. And they're like, Krypto, you're a good boy. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about us. We love you. You're a good boy. Oh my God. That hit me like a ton of bricks. It's the 1-2 punch of the speak normally. Like, don't let him know something's wrong. Keep him calm. Mm-hmm. And then just the, don't worry about us. We love you. Like, oh man, I really, really got me. Just a powerful moment. I'm really looking forward to the rest of that miniseries. And regardless of how the rest of it turns out, that first issue was so strong. I won't spoil the ending of that first issue. People should go out and read it, but I'm really curious to see where it goes from the end of that. But that one page when he's in the rocket approaching the wormhole and the words of Jor-El and Lara at that critical juncture just really, really packed a punch for me. So that's my number 8. All right, your number 7.
So now we're getting into, there's, for me, almost interchangeable amounts of love. So I chose Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. It is one of the examples of, if it were not for Krypto, this entire story would not have happened. If Krypto did not have the relationship with Supergirl that he did, she would not have gone through all of this. Knowing that this is the graphic novel that James Gunn has based the next Supergirl movie upon, I can absolutely see why he's introducing Krypto in the Superman film and setting us up to love Krypto, because when the event occurs in Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, where Krypto needs her, if we as the audience have already fallen in love with Krypto in the Superman film, and then this happens in the Supergirl film, I think we're going to be very with Kara of, you have to save Krypto. You have to. And therefore begins the film. And begins the journey, and it's a journey of self-discovery for Kara herself, which is predominantly what the series is about. But beyond the absolutely stunning artwork of that series, the setup, the reason, why begin the Odyssey? Well, this is why, and it's undeniable, and it's because of Krypto.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I toyed with including it. Obviously, not obviously, you don't know the rest of my list yet. I didn't, but I'm glad that you did. And that's something I read, and we did an episode, or it was part of a larger Tom King episode that we did a couple of years ago. There will be a revisitation of Woman of Tomorrow before we get to the movie. But yeah, that's great. And that also speaks to what we were getting at before about how Krypto can serve as his companion, not just to Kal-El, but he also has these relationships with other members of the Superman family. And Woman of Tomorrow is not the only instance where he's been paired with Supergirl. And so I like that dynamic as well. And I like to see Krypto sort of having those dynamics and relationships with others as well, especially at critical moments in their development. So yeah, that's a great one. My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring great insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On To banner, including Arrow, Star Wars, and more. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a new podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title also makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is Logan's favorite character and a regular topic of discussion on Single Bound. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow them on social media. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. Okay, my number 7. Okay, this was a little bit of a toss-up here. I guess I'll talk about both of them, but I'll lead with what I actually picked, which is Superman number 681 from 2008 by James Robinson and Renato Guedes. Now, I didn't say 680, I said 681, and there's one page in that story. This is early days of the new Krypton saga. So we have 100,000 Kryptonians who have been freed from the Bottle City. Jonathan Kent recently died in the Brainiac story. Connor's not around at this point. And there's this one page where Martha is on the farm alone, totally alone. And she opens the door, and who's standing there on the front porch? Krypto. There for Martha in her hour of loneliness and need. And so I had to give the edge to that. Now I say it was a toss-up because the one that I think would have been the more traditional pick would have been Superman 680, the prior issue, which was the conclusion of the Coming of Atlas story where Krypto intervenes and defends Superman and beats down Atlas. Is that on your list?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I'll stop there. All I'll say is that it was really, really tight. I'm actually glad that I went the way I did because it's represented. 680 is represented on yours, but I wanted to go with 681 because that moment with Martha really just kind of tapped into what I'm finding to be the most powerful aspect of Krypto. So it's Krypto showing up in 681 to comfort Martha. Sorry, that's my number 7. Your number 6.
The last episode of Superman and Lois, the series finale, the heartbreaking part of that story is that, Clark achieved somewhat humanity. He got what he always wanted, was to have life and love in Smallville. He got to see his children happy and have lives of their own. I'm trying so hard not to do spoilers. But by virtue of being human, he ages and realizes that he will one day reach the end of his own life. He has had to say goodbye to Lois. And so it's really just him and the farm. So similar to the moment you just described with Martha alone on the farm, Clark takes in this dog. And what I love about it is that it's so reminiscent of Shelby from Smallville that had its own Krypto moment where he was nearly named Krypto and Lois intervened and said, "Yeah, you can name your next dog Krypto." But talk about the bookend moment of finding young Clark as a boy and emotionally saving him then, finding the Twilight Clark and saving him then. And in that moment where Clark did eventually reach the end of his life, Krypto was there. So, yeah, that is right there, solid on my list.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, regardless of the issues I had with the final season of Superman and Lois, I cannot deny that moment. It was really, really beautiful. And yeah, the beginning and end, the seasons of his life, there's something very, very powerful about him being there at the end. I like that. All right, great. My number 6. Actually, this goes back to an episode you joined me for a long time ago, but it's the short story Fetch from Superman Red and Blue number 5.
Oh, yeah.
From 2021. This was by Judd Winnick and Ibrahim Mustafa. And short story from Superman Red and Blue, which was a great anthology miniseries. We had a great time talking about it. If anyone still hasn't read it, check it out. There's some really, really beautiful stories in there. It's just a few pages, but it recounts Krypto arriving, Clark finding him, and that bond being formed. But I think what stood out to me was Clark's in a bit of a funk, right? And he's a bit more withdrawn. He's quote unquote not eating. And by that, we mean he hasn't had 5 helpings. He's only had 2 instead of his normal serving. But he's a bit withdrawn, right? And he's going through a little bit of a tough time, which is natural for anybody, and especially a young kid. But there's this added layer that Clark is very different. And the dog arrives, and you just see Clark come out of this with the arrival of Krypto. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan and Martha are talking about this at the end. And I think it's Jonathan who's like, well, good dog, like that'll do it. And Martha's like, yes, but also, everyone feels different, but Clark really is. And now there's someone who he can relate to and engage with in a different way. So just hearkening back to everything we said about Krypto generally and what he can kind of represent. But yeah, it was just to see him kind of come out of that. And I really just liked that. It just felt very real in terms of what it captured as far as that family dynamic and the parents struggle to get through to the kid at this tough point. So I love that. That was definitely a standout for me. So that's Fetch from Red and Blue number 5. That's my number 6.
Yeah, I would highly encourage people to read that. Tonally, it's so well done.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it just feels great.
All right, so we're halfway through. You're number 5.
So I guess if you were going to mention one that mostly you wouldn't have done without us talking, I'm going to do the same. I never watched the show Titans on my own until I met you.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I'll at least watch the Krypto episodes, of which there are about 6. Some of them are just brief appearances, and some of them are very, very much a Krypto episode. But I was so pleasantly surprised at those particular episodes that I ended up watching a lot more of Titans. One of the things that I loved the most is, again, this is an example of, were it not for Krypto, large parts of the story would not have happened. So it begins as a stinger, an after credits stinger at the end of season 1, where you see a imprisoned, probably at Cadmus, it's hard to tell yet, Connor, and he hears this noise, this sort of call for help kind of a noise, and you see that it's Krypto in a cage. And so Connor breaks free to go rescue whatever this is that clearly needs help, and tears the door off, and Krypto steps forward and the red eyes light up, and scene. And so as a teaser, you think, oh, wow, we're going to get live action Krypto. Holy Moses. And then we have to wait 6 episodes into the next season before we get it. But they straight up name the episode Connor, and they tie it in to a whole other action set piece where Robin is falling to his death, and suddenly Connor swoops up and saves him. then they backtrack that moment of why was Connor there, and they backtrack it by telling the story of Krypto and Connor, who have now escaped Cadmus, and they are just making their way in the world. It shows the first time he buys the T-shirt, which is a very funny scene, by the way. But it shows them bonding and them sort of looking out for each other. And that's not a story that I had seen before, where there is no Superman who is assigned Krypto, go take care of this person. There is almost no one on their side. They're just there with each other. So I thought it was a very fresh take on that relationship. And then when Connor tells Eve, the scientist who, worked on the successful experiment that even made this all happen, that the reason he broke out of his tube was, I heard someone howling in pain. So we would not have had Superboy if it were not for Krypto. So imagine Titans without Superboy. So I loved that they gave Krypto the place in the legend of he is the reason that we have Superboy.
Right on. There's still a lot more that I need to do with that Titan show, but I did watch that Connor episode when we did our Connor event earlier this year. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I still remain, as I talked about when we did those episodes, a bit mixed on versions of the story that by choice or by necessity have to excise the whole death of Superman and reign of the Superman piece of it. And you have to introduce Connor divorced from all of that. Mm-hmm. But it definitely can work. And I think this is a good instance of it. And yeah, I mean, what a treat just to see live action Krypto. I mean, it's interesting because I know people seem like really excited about Krypto in the movie coming up, and that's great. If people are that excited and interested, they should go check out some of those Titans episodes, because I think, yeah, definitely really solid Krypto there.
Yeah. And we get a lot of the themes that we've touched on. I mean, there's a part of the storyline where Connor is really, really hurt by Kryptonite and is laid up, and the Titans are trying to take care of him. Starfire's trying to take care of him. And Krypto basically crawls up in the bed and stays by his side and does not leave. There's another moment where, Connor needs help. And so Krypto goes to Titan Tower and basically rings the doorbell. And they look out and they're like, it's a dog, but I mean, Krypto does all the Krypto things in live action, and it's pretty great.
Right on. All right. So you've already heard my number 5, which is the death metal secret origin issue. So it's right back to you for number 4.
My number 4 was the League of Super Pets.
Okay, cool. So then it's back to me. So my number 4, I surprised myself by putting this as high on the list as I did, but it was such a fun standout moment. And I guess this does buck the trend a little bit for me, that I went for something that was more on the comedic side, but it still packs its punch as well. But it's from Adventure Comics number 3 from 2009 by Jeff Johns and Francis Manapul. This is the Boy of Steel arc after Connor has returned from the dead and is back living in Smallville with Ma and Krypto, but with a newfound sense of appreciation for the place and for Krypto in particular. But there's this great bit in that 3rd issue where Connor's in class and he hears Krypto, and it turns out Krypto's rounded up all of his old rogues gallery and just plopped them in the field. And Connor comes out and initially chastises Krypto. It's like, bad dog, what are you doing? And it's so funny because he's like, I think one of them was already locked up. He's like, I think Silver Sword reformed. He's like, what are you doing? And he's really on edge because this could potentially jeopardize his secret identity. He's like, you could put Ma in danger. And poor Krypto is just sitting there with those sad eyes. Mm. And maybe this is a testament to Connor's development, evolution at this point, that he catches himself and he's like, I'm sorry, boy. Like, I know you were just trying to help. You're a good boy. He's like, let's just drop him off at Strikers and they'll figure it out. But it's so there is some depth to the scene, but it was just the sight gag. And it's this beautiful, I think, wordless panel that takes up about half the page. And I mean, Francis Manapul, one of my all-time favorite artists. Like, that stuff is so gorgeous. And just the shot of Krypto sitting there in the field, surrounded by this quartet of villains. So great. And that was actually mentioned by one of our audience members as well, Logan. And Lulu says, it's a hilarious moment that's relatable to all dog owners, even if they've never fought a shark man hybrid. Are you familiar with this moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my number 4. Real fun one. And when we covered that recently, I was like, I filed that one away. I'm like, oh, that's so good. We got to talk. Whenever we talk about Krypto, we got to talk about that. All right. So that was my number 4. Your number 3.
Oh, I went classic. Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. The final scene is just quintessential Krypto. Selfless, loyal, heroic is too small of a word. But there are 2 moments. There's the end of book 1 where Superman is alone in a room and he's feeling the desperation. He's feeling that we're not getting out of this okay. And he's, in the large trophy room by himself. And then up walks Krypto and without a word just sits with him. But in the final battle, you have the villains outside the fortress and they're inching in. They're going to breach. There's really no way to stop it. And, Lana and Jimmy have taken their superpowered, potions and they're out there doing their best. And Krypto is out there doing his best. And up comes the Kryptonite man. And Krypto goes feral and launches himself on a suicide mission because he will protect Cal. And if this dog knows anything, that is what his whole life is about. And he is going to do this. And the line that Alan Moore wrote of where the Kryptonite man cannot comprehend this. And he keeps saying, what is the matter with you, you stupid dog? Don't you understand that I'm killing you? And Krypto's eyes do not care. And he gives his life. So that is my number 3.
All right. So I can't deny the power of the moment you cited. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow made it onto mine as an honorable mention. It didn't get a spot on the actual list, but I did want to include it. The moment of him sacrificing his life to stop Kryptonite Man, like I said, undeniably powerful. I guess I just wish he didn't have to. I wish it didn't have to be a fight to the finish the way that it was.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part of me that just, and who am I to rewrite Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow? But there's a part of me that says, imagine if when Superman is walking into that gold Kryptonite chamber and he turns around, if he gives a little whistle and all of a sudden Krypto comes and walks with him into that Kryptonite chamber.
Oh.
And so once that thought crossed my mind, I was like, and that's why I think I couldn't put it on the official list, but it made an honorable mention. I just wish if it had looked like Krypto was done for, but then that last little bit of magic, Superman whistles for him. They go in together. I would not have minded that, but it's a wonderful pick and echoed by 2 of our audience members. So Brian says the scene at the end of the first issue, Krypto at Superman's feet while he's crying over seeing Kara after her death in Crisis. Such a good, loyal dog. And then Logan says, the way Moore builds up the new and improved Kryptonite Man and shows you how out of control that power has made his ego, only to then be slain before he ever meets Superman by the Dog of Steel. It's a beautiful, Old Yeller-esque send-off to the goodest boy on Earth 1 and perfectly foreshadows Superman's own ending in the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, it's everything that Krypto is. You could imagine his dog heart was driven by nothing but love and loyalty, encapsulated in a page of frames.
Yeah. All right. So remind me, that was your number 3, right?
Yes.
Okay. So my number 3, this will not be shocking given recent episodes that we did. This is a slight cheat, but they bookend each other. So I'm going to allow it as host. So Superman number 170 from 2001 by Jeff Loeb and Dale Keown, and Teen Titans number 7 from just a few years later by Jeff Johns and Tom Grummett. And we talked about both of these issues recently, but Superman 170, we have Mongol and his sister Mongal attack. And there's this beautiful device throughout the story where essentially that's a child's picture book that's written by Clark Kent and illustrated by Kyle Rayner. That's all about Krypto and how Krypto's a dog who likes to chew bones and all of this. But he's also Superman's dog and he has all these powers. Yet he is still just a dog and he makes a mistake in that story. He, in defending Lois from Mongul, bites Mongul's throat and nearly kills him. And Superman decides that he's too dangerous and decides to sequester Krypto in the fortress with the robot Ned, who will periodically secrete Superman's pheromones to keep Krypto happy. And it's such a heartbreaking turn, and it follows. This is very shortly after Return to Krypton, when this version of Krypto emerged from the Phantom Zone Krypton. And this has been a bit of I think, a point of tension in the marriage, because issue after issue, Krypto's like tearing apart Lois and Clark's apartment, and she's pretty much fed up with this dog. But then she ends up being his defender after everything with Mom. She's like, he was just trying to help me. He was just protecting me. So that really packs a punch. But for Superman to make that choice, or have to make that choice, or feel like he had to make that choice and send Krypto away, is heartbreaking. But then when we get the other side of that story in Teen Titans #7, early days of that book where Connor has joined the team, and Superman meets up with Connor and says he has a gift for him. And the gift is Krypto. And he says, I've been trying to find out the right place for him. It's not the city. He's all alone at the fortress. But here in Smallville, he's got wide open field. He's got space. He's got fresh air, and a boy who needs a friend. And look, it's a rough start for Connor and Krypto. By the time we get to that post-resurrection Connor, he's really found that appreciation for Krypto. A little rough going at first, but just to kind of have Krypto reintegrated into society and not be kept away at the fortress anymore was great. And the beginning of this pairing, the Connor Krypto pairing, which I love, and leads to so many other great moments like we already talked about. So that combo of Superman 170 and Teen Titans #7.
Yeah. And I just love some of the panels, where they're playing fetch with the entire tree trunk.
Yeah.
And Connor's still not sold on the idea, and Superman's just being patient, exhibiting some paw in that moment. There's some great little touches in that.
Yes. All right. Your #2.
Well, The Coming of Atlas. So there's the trade paperback for anyone who wants to just sort of go down to your local shop and support your local shop and pick up this trade paperback. Individual issues are Superman 677 through 680. Superman 680, by the way, is the famous Alex Ross cover that we've all seen. I am choosing this as the entire run, the whole, not just one moment or one issue, but the entire story arc, because of Lois. Because there are those scenes where Lois has had it with Krypto. He's too destructive. He doesn't listen. He shouldn't be here. And she's arguing with Clark in the kitchen. And she's saying, well, he can't be here. And he's like, well, what do you mean? You mean here at the house? And she's like, no, like on the planet. And Clark defends Krypto in a way that I think any boy who's ever just said, please. I mean, he says basically in the end, no, he's a good dog. In the midst of like torn furniture and chaos, Clark is still standing there going, no, he's a good dog. And in almost a slight act of defiance says, he's my dog. And you see Lois just emotionally sigh and say, okay, all right, and yes, there's a battle, and yes, Krypto comes to his aid, and yes, Krypto wins against Atlas, which gives you almost your Kryptonite battle where it didn't have to be to the death.
Right. Yeah.
And so the reason I chose this as my #2 is the symmetry of this, because at the end of the battle, all of Metropolis has seen this. Superman was down, and Krypto saved not just Superman, but the city. And when it's over, Superman stands there and basically proudly proclaims, "This is my dog. And now, Metropolis, he's your dog too." Oh,
Yeah. And this is a hero.
And
This is your hero. Yeah. Beautiful. Like I said, it was really a toss up as far as which of those James Robinson issues was going to make it in. But I'm glad that it's represented and beautifully said. One thing I want to ask you about, because in that issue, and I would say that's an outlier in the modern era Krypto, in that we hear Krypto's thoughts. He has thought captions. Limited, simple, sort of broken phrases, but me protect man, me make man happy, stuff like that. Obviously, back in the pre-crisis days, we had full-on thought bubbles and and all of that. Where do you land on whether and to what extent we should be privy to Krypto's literal thoughts?
If it were up to me, I would say we never hear them.
Agreed.
I would like to experience Krypto the way Cal does.
Yes.
Where their communication is unspoken, it's intuitive, it's built on everything that they've been through together. I'd want to keep it that way.
I agree. I'm willing to carve out exceptions for kids / all ages stories that are really built around Krypto and follow Krypto either solo and or with other animals, like the League of Super Pets movie or the Krypto the Super Dog Cartoon Network show. But those are pretty limited, isolated instances where I'm okay with it. Otherwise, I'm with you wholeheartedly. We should experience the character the way Superman does. And I swear to God, if this dog talks in the new movie, I'm really going to have a problem. I'm saying this now. It doesn't seem like that'll be the case, but we'll find out soon enough.
Well, and honestly, you don't need it because R2-D2 didn't need it. The tone was enough, the body gestures, the sort of shaking back and forth, and some beeps were more angry than other beeps. You can get that from dog barks. You can get that from dog posture. You don't need it.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Number 2 is specifically the backup story from Action Comics number 13 from the New 52 era. And this backup story by Shali Fish and Brad Walker. Is this on your list?
No.
Oh my goodness. Really? I'm shocked. I'm not judging, but I'm shocked because this was the one that was far and away garnered the most submissions from our audience members. Interesting. Okay. So we talked about this not too long ago too, when we went through the Morrison action run from the New 52, but essentially here, the twist on the Krypto story that we get is that prior to Krypton's destruction, we had criminals from the Phantom Zone who were trying to escape, and Krypto sacrificed himself in order to protect the L family, but ended up getting pulled into the Phantom Zone. But we find out in this story throughout, but particularly in that very emotional backup story, is that Krypto, as this phantom, the ghost dog, has been with Clark all the days of his life, there as this silent, unseen, unfelt companion at high moments, low moments, cuddling up to him at night when the barrier between dimensions is at its weakest, and that's Krypto's favorite. Oh, and that's what I was saying at the beginning, where generally I don't want Krypto like literally in the rocket with Clark, but this sort of twist on it where he has been there all along, but Clark just hasn't known it. And thankfully, in that issue, in the main story, we see Krypto rescued from the Phantom Zone, which was great. But just that 6-page backup or however long it was so moving to me. And I want to share what some of our audience members said. So this is from Brian. He says, "While I'm not a fan of the New 52 wolf-like design, I want Krypto to look approachable to children. This story is memorable and heartbreaking. The story of Krypto trapped in the Phantom Zone, but following Clark through life in his phantom state, I can't. I have not reread the issue in years because just the idea of it makes me tear up." Jan says, "The issue makes me cry every time I read it, specifically the sequence where we see that Krypto was always watching over Clark from the Phantom Zone. Oh, beautiful stuff. That issue is what sold me on the idea of Krypto. Chase says, I've got to agree with the others. Krypto's introduction in the New 52 is one of my favorite issues of that era. Josh says, I also came here to sing the praises of Sholly Fish's beautiful Krypto story. Fish should be a much bigger deal than he seems to be. Logan says, it made me cry when I read it. It made me misty typing about it. I love it so much. I wish it was Krypto's origin all the time. Not only is it the most emotionally compelling to me, but it cuts down on the number of rockets Jor-El was somehow able to fire off into the cosmos without bothering to make one for his wife. Aw. And then Tim echoes this as well, and he also highlights a few other moments from the New 52. So one of them is when the Super Warrior Wanderers come upon a Kryptonite chained Krypto in issue 18, and they say they broke the Hound's spirit, and then they say a Krypton guard dog, he'll simply grow a new one. And the final page of issue 18 where Superman and Krypto are victorious, and Cal says you should see the other guy.
Yeah.
So I'm just surprised that it didn't make it on, but that's all right.
It is not that I'm not aware of it, and it's not that I don't absolutely love it, but I had to make room for my number one.
That's fair. That's fair. But well, now I'm especially curious. So what is your number one?
My number one, I guess, pleasantly surprised that no one has guessed it. So first, let me start by saying that one of the biggest Krypto fans in DC writing history is Elliot S. Maggin. At a point in his career, he had an idea for a Krypto novel, which never saw the light of day in published form, but it is published on little websites here and there, nooks and crannies. There's one called supermanthroughtheages.com, and it's published there. It's called Starwind's Howl.
I got to give a shout out to our audience member, Tim. He had shouted that one out. He had included that on his submission. Right on.
It is page for page, beat for beat, moment for moment, the best Krypto story I have ever read. It chronicles everything from Krypton early days. And one of the things that I love Elliot for is he'll create more of the myth that you already love. So in this story, he explained that the word Krypton is their word for the sheets of ice that cover the inhabitable regions of the planet. So in the same way, we call Earth, Earth, meaning the dirt and the solid ground. They call Krypton, Krypton, because it's mostly covered by these sheets of ice, and that's where they live.
Okay.
When baby Kal-El first started to bond with this test animal, he saw that this animal was so pure white that to him it looked like ice. So this baby tried to say the word Krypton. But as babies do, he didn't exactly get it right. So he said Krypto. And that's where the name came from. That's the kind of love that Elliot puts in this story. In this story, the first test goes wrong, not because of something that Jor-El did, but because a meteor knocked the rocket off course. And Krypto found himself adrift in space, which is a very scary place to find yourself. But slowly his powers kicked in, and he could hear things and he could see things. And so he made his way, ends up on a ship of pirates. So imagine sort of, Guardians of the Galaxy. He's Peter Quill in a way. He's brought on by these pirates, sort of Treasure Island style, and he contributes and they find him valuable and he forms bonds. But they're pirates and they're running these missions, and then ultimately they get themselves in something they can't get out of, and Krypto is on his own again. They're all destroyed. But he can sense that the boy he used to love is out there somewhere. So this is where those super senses we talked about before kick in, and this becomes sort of the homeward bound story of it is a huge galaxy, but he is going to find this boy. He's convinced that that boy is out there and he can smell him. And so he makes his way to Earth. Meanwhile, Clark is in that phase where he's at the farm and he's spending more and more time by himself. And there's another terrific scene where, Paul comes in and he's kind of worried about him a little bit. And Krypto lands on Earth and slowly, slowly, slowly makes his way to Clark, who is full on Superboy. And so when he finally gets there, it's this well-earned reunion of not only is it that Krypto arrives when Clark really needs him, but we got to see everything that this dog went through. He didn't just land and pop out of a rocket. He traversed galaxies to get here. And that I can't spoil the ending, but I'm just saying that the tears and the emotions that people have when they read about the Phantom Zone Krypto is how I felt at the end of Starwind's Howl.
Beautiful. No, I will definitely read that. Very well familiar with the Superman Through the Ages website. It's a great repository of some really key stories that are largely otherwise unavailable. So I will definitely check that out. You and Tim have sold me on it. So that's beautiful. A fantastic number one pick. Before I give my number one pick and wrap this up, there are a few more audience submissions I just want to roll through here. So this actually also made it onto my honorable mentions because I wanted the Filmation shorts to be included because, you and I did a whole episode on those Superboy Filmation cartoons. And I think that was pretty kind of formative for me, even at this point in my journey of just really seeing the value of Superboy, of Krypto, and of Clark and Krypto together, right? Because they're such a duo in so many of those shorts. And so Brian says, I was born in 1975 and I would see the old Filmation cartoons as a preschooler. Krypto was just there, a boy and his dog. I just took for granted where Superboy was, so was Krypto. My fandom of Krypto, my default opinion of his and Clark's relationship is fully informed by these shorts. I definitely love the episode Krypto's Calamitous Capers. Krypto is exposed to an ultrasonic frequency that causes him to act aggressively, which is used by criminals to get away with their crimes. When the signal disappears, Krypto reverts and feels bad about his actions. Then Superboy figures out what's going on and ties a kerchief around Krypto's ears. We get a moment of Krypto standing on two legs and crossing his front legs like arms as they confront the bad guys. Absolutely ridiculous, but completely foundational to me. This is Krypto. And I would say if I had to single out one of those shorts for the Krypto of it all, I think it would be that one. I also rewatched Krypto, the Super Seeing Eye Dog, but he's the one who blinds Superboy. He's the one who blasts him with that weapon.
He told him, don't touch those. Yes.
Yeah, so I think I would go with the Calamitous Capers as well. And it also gives us that really famous gif you see all the time of Superboy pushing Krypto away. Some love for the Filmation shorts. And though Brian and I, experienced them at very different points in our lives, pretty formative. And then we also have a 5 million here says the Krypto, the Superdog animated series. He says, I was fortunate enough to be able to watch Krypto as a toddler when it aired on Cartoon Network and reruns on Boomerang. That made me feel old. It wasn't a favorite, but it definitely gave me a good understanding of the character at a young age. Probably my first introduction to the idea of a bat hound too. So this was largely a blind spot for me. I actually just went out. It was very cheap on Amazon. So I bought the complete series DVD set and I watched a couple of episodes. I watched the first one and then I watched one where Krypto and the young boy he lives with, Kevin, they're exposed to red kryptonite and switch bodies. And then in the second part of that episode, there's a team up with Ace the Bat Hound and they go up against Joker's hyenas. And I put this on while my son was building his Legos. He's almost 6. And it's funny. I found with him sometimes when we make too big of a deal, like, oh, we're going to sit down and watch something. Sometimes he's like, no, I don't want to. So I was like, let me just put this on and let me see what he does. And he got instantly pulled into it. Like, I think it's perfect for his age group. It's not something I would have ever sought out. I mean, in 2005, I'm in college at that point. Like, I wouldn't have been watching this on my own, really. But watching it with, not knocking anyone if they do, but I just had such a blast watching those couple of episodes with him, and he was really engaged by it. And I think it's perfect for his age group. And we do get Superman in the first episode, but yeah, I mean, Krypto ends up being found by and going to live with Kevin and his family. And there's this translator that's included in his collar. It's like this little earpiece that Kevin puts in. And then he's able to understand what Krypto is saying. But yeah, real cute series that again ran for 39 episodes. And I think especially for a young viewer, it's pretty cool. So I'm glad I have that. And I look forward to, popping in the rest of those discs and watching them with my son.
Yeah, I would absolutely support that. If you have young children and you're looking for an entry point, that or the League of Super Pets are solid choices. They're going to learn great lessons. It's just wholesome. It's just terrific. And that first episode, the one we do get Superman in, again gives us a classic motif of he knows this boy needs Krypto right now, and he gives full permission. Like, Krypto, stay with him.
Yeah.
Take care of him, be what he needs. So it does not miss the mark. It's what we hope for.
And Paul Dini and Alan Burnett were among the producers. So great pedigree. So yeah, I mean, I feel like this is one that's very under the radar, but yeah, Krypto the Superdog. And then Logan says, my favorite solo story is Superboy number 92 from 1961, in which Krypto has to protect Smallville from a young Lex Luthor and his newly empowered dog, Destructo, the Hound of Hate. It's a gem and gave me the lifelong dream of writing a Suicide Squad story with Destructo, too powerful to be killed with a bomb in his head, but happy to participate in Black Ops missions if it means he gets some pork fat and belly scratches. I read this one based on Logan's submission, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. I obviously didn't make it onto my list, but it was a lot of fun where Lex creates this ray to give himself powers, but the dog gets in the way and ends up with the powers himself. And then Lex hatches the scheme. He puts Destructo in a red cape and makes it seem like Krypto is the one who's committing all of these crimes across town. And then ultimately, and Superboy is off in space. He's evacuating a planet that's about to explode like Krypton. So he's off the board for most of it. But Krypto figures out what's going on because everybody's turning on him and he can't figure out why. And then he pieces it together and he steals a bag of change from the Kent General Store and he pokes a little hole in it. And so he leaves a trail of coins to Luthor's hideout. It's great. And then Superboy returns and intervenes and Destructo is depowered by the end of it. But yeah, really, it was a fun one. That was definitely a fun one. Are you familiar with that one, Destructo?
I think I must have read it quite a while ago, but I remember at the time thinking there's a place for those. There's a place for just those charming, fun, throwback. They don't have to be, hugely important to some arc. They can just be fun.
Yeah, and that one certainly is. Okay. So thank you to all the audience members who sent in picks. Really do appreciate it. And some great stuff and a number of stories, including that one that were new to me. So I really do appreciate it because I don't purport to be a crypto expert. More of one now after all of this, but I appreciated the submissions. My number one pick, and I'm surprised that I'm a little just no one brought this one up, but Superman number 712 from 2011 by Kurt Busiek and Rick Leonardi. Now, this was an inventory story that, again, came out in 2011, but was set in the immediate aftermath of Infinite Crisis, which ended in 2006. And it came out in 2011 during a delay in the Grounded arc by J. Michael Straczynski. And there's even an editor's note from our pal Matt Idelson at the beginning. It's like, sorry for the Grounded delay. Enjoy this classic from the post-Infinite Crisis period. But it depicts Krypto in mourning over the loss of Connor in Infinite Crisis. And there's a flashback. We see Krypto and Connor playing fetch. I think first they try with the Frisbee and Krypto tears it apart. And then Superboy goes and gets a manhole cover and they play fetch with that. But in the present day, Krypto is just lying there on the porch, not eating, not moving. And Jonathan and Martha correctly surmise like he's waiting for Connor, but Connor's not coming back. And throughout the issue, going back to the idea of the scent that you were just talking about with that Magan story, he follows Connor's scent to sort of his last major stops before his death. And we kind of see through flashback imagery what was kind of going on with Connor at that point in time as Krypto's retracing his steps. But it culminates in the ruins of Alexander Luthor's cosmic tuning fork, the tower that Connor sacrificed himself to destroy. And there's blood in the snow and Krypto is sniffing it. And he realizes
that's the last place.
And he howls and the howl echoes across the lands. And we see all of these panels as people are hearing this. And then at the very end, Krypto takes the manhole cover and takes it to space and just sort of camps out on this asteroid with the manhole cover next to him. Oh, what a beautiful story. And a rare instance. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about here are moments within other stories, right? But like this was an entire issue and a largely silent issue. I mean, except for a little bit of the, Jonathan and Martha dialogue, but like a largely silent issue from Krypto's perspective as he is realizing that Connor's not coming back and mourning his loss. Oh man, it was so good. So that's my number one pick.
I find it so interesting that both of our number one picks are from Krypto's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And that quest, that search. Yeah. Very interesting. This was great. I'm really glad we were able to engage in this survey of Krypto across time and media. And I think we hit on some great moments. I put it out to the audience, those who submitted and those who didn't. I mean, if there's anything we didn't mention that we should check out, please write in. Let us know what Krypto moments resonate the most with you. I'd be really curious to hear. And I thank you, Daniel, so much for joining me. I guess the last thing I want to ask you, we are approaching this new Superman movie that features Krypto. Now, when you go to see the movie, will you be there in costume and will your Krypto be with you as you have done for like the League of Super Pets movie?
It's really at the comfort level of the theater themselves. I have a contact. I'm waiting to hear back. We might, but one thing that I think we will do is the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation is running a charity drive that same weekend where anyone who wants to appear as Superman or Krypto can collect donations that will go to their foundation. So I will be here at our local comic shop, which is Sanctuary Comics and Games here in Irving, Texas, to represent the foundation and bring out the love of Superman and all the hope that he stands for.
Right on. That's beautiful. And if it's cool with you, I'll post at least a photo of you with your Krypto in costume so people can see exactly what we're talking about. And I definitely encourage everyone to follow @wearingthecape on Instagram. Thank you so much, man. This was great.
Oh, thank you. And thanks to everyone who gave your picks too. I'm definitely going to go out and complete my reading history. Those all sounded pretty terrific.
Awesome. So thank you, audience. Guys, the time has come at last. Next week, our epic multi-episode event, James Gunning for Superman, begins. Make sure you're here next Tuesday for our official pregame episode. I'll be joined in studio by the duo of Sweet Sweet Bernie and Justin DeVoe. We'll talk all about where we are as we're heading into this movie, final thoughts, predictions. We'll talk about our favorite movie snacks and theater going habits, and it'll be a ton of fun. And then make sure you keep your eye on the Digging for Kryptonite feed all next week, because we're going to be dropping a quartet of episodes breaking down the movie and tackling some topics related to it. So it's going to be a ton of fun. Don't miss any of it. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. Support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, advanced listens, and more by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Subscribe, rate, and review today via your platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Links are in the show notes. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now covering the color era of the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today.